Hey y'all, it's me again. Sorry it took me so long because I've been so busy. So so yeah, I'm gonna continue reading the Secret Lives of the First Ladies. Okay, let's go. Fast food. With all her ambitious projects as First Lady, Eleanor ended up neglecting something that most of her predecessors considered fundamental to the role: basic housekeeping. It wasn't long after the Roosevelts moved into the White House before tourists began noticing how shabby the place looked. Nor was Eleanor very interested in creating elaborate menus. Back during the First World War, the Roosevelts threw regular soirees with fellow Washingtonians known as the Club to talk shop and virtually every time eat the same meal. Scrambled eggs and salad. Years later, while First Lady, Eleanor served hot dogs to the visiting King and Queen of England at Hyde Park. To compensate for her lack of interest in the kitchen, the First Lady hired a housekeeper named Henrietta Nesbit, who unfortunately was much better at whipping up tasty fare than Eleanor was. Mrs. Nesbit's notoriously bland, basic dishes became the butt of FDR's jokes throughout the administration. It's a good thing the Roosevelts took a lively conversation list because it was the only thing they guests had to look forward to on visits to the White House. Damn. The shootist. Eleanor never got big. Eleanor was never big on bodyguards. They merely got in the way, especially when she was trying to look like one of the people. She loved meeting with crowds, a fact that worried her husband. Sometimes it drove the Secret Service nuts. At the insistence of those who were concerned about her safety, Eleanor learned how to handle a pistol, sort of. After seeing her in action at the FBI firing range, J. Edgar Hoover told the president that Eleanor couldn't hit a barn door and probably shouldn't be walking around with a weapon. Eleanor's only bodyguard, a former New York State trooper named Earl Miller, took time to coach the First Lady in firing use, but she seems never to have taken it seriously. She ended up keeping the gun in the glove compartment of her car, unloaded. Okay. Hanky panky. After it wasn't exactly the most faithful husband a woman could have, in addition to Lucy Mercer, whom he began seeing again in 1944 after promising his wife not 2 years earlier, he had a White House fling with his sister, Missy Lehan. But what about his wife? Did Eleanor have any affairs? Consider the case of Lorena Hickok. An Associated Press reporter began covering the Roosevelts during the 1932 presidential campaign. Hick and Eleanor became fast friends. In fact, Hick became so enamored of Mrs. Roosevelt that she no longer felt capable of reporting objectively, and she quit her job as a journalist to take a post in the administration. The two developed a deeply close relationship, and some historians are convinced that they shared a physical relationship, especially during the years that Hick spent living in the White House, and right across from Illinois. One thing is certain: the First Lady's outrageous schedule made it impossible for her to devote as much time to her relationship as Hick would have liked, and the four journalists eventually became involved with other women. So Eleanor was 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 bi, I think, was considered, would nowadays be considered bi, because she loved men and women. Or maybe she was a total lesbian and she was using her first cousin once removed, FDR, I think, as a beard to cover up for her lesbianisms or something. I don't know. But that's something to think about, you know? I mean, like, huh. The Lincoln Memorial will do nicely. Eleanor's most famous stance against racism occurred in 1939 when the Daughters of the American Revolution refused to allow black singer Marian Anderson to perform the organization's Constitution Hall. The First Lady resigned from the DAR almost immediately, but then leave at that. With Eleanor's sponsorship, Anderson went on to give a concert anyway, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial before a huge crowd. Good for her. Chapter 29. Bess Truman. February 13th, 1885 through October 18th, 1982. Married June 28th, 1919. Presidential husband, Harry S. Truman. Children, Mary Margaret. Did they get the name Mary Margaret from Bess Truman's daughter on Once Upon a Time? Maybe, who knows? And Mary Margaret was a very, very famous lady's name way back when. So, but I don't know. It makes me think, you know. I don't know. So, anyways, let's continue. First lady, 1945 to 1953. Astrological sign, Aquarius. Oh, no more Virgo. Oh well. I'm just saying that because I'm a Virgo. Very few Virgo women in the White House. Sad, but I guess true. We'll see. Religion, Episcopalian. Sound, but Uma's place in public is to sit beside her husband. Be silent and be sure her hat is on straight. Okay. Whatever. The White House wouldn't have survived without the spectacular renovation efforts of Bess Truman. Congress wanted to raise the building and start over, but Bess fought to keep the landmark preserved. Way to go, Bess! Love her! Bess Truman had the exact same reaction as her predecessor to becoming First Lady. She wept. But Eleanor Roosevelt was worried that she was destined to become a mere extension of her important husband. Mrs. Truman's reservations about the White House were over something closer to home. To Bess, being a president's spouse meant surrendering her family's privacy and exposure to a greedy public, the painful event that she had striven so mightily to forget. That event was her father's suicide. By 1903, David Wallace's drinking and debt had overwhelmed and he checked out with a pistol. His wife Madge, the daughter of a wealthy flour miller, had enough money to support herself and her 4 children in their large home in Independence, Missouri, but she never got over David's tragic death and surrendered to her eldest child, Bess, the role of running the family. With her mother and 3 younger brothers relying on her, Bess developed an attachment to Hearth and home that only became stronger with time. She was a tomboy who could hit a baseball out of the sandlot and ride horses with ease. At fantasy school in Kansas City, she even won the shot put. Damn. Her father killed himself because he couldn't take it anymore. How did she not break down or anything? I mean, like, I guess because she couldn't, but I mean, like, still. Oh my God. Now I feel so bad for Bess. No wonder she's so strong and whatnot in every sense of the word. And in every way. She had to be. She also won the heart of Harry Truman, though for years she didn't even know it. According to Harry, he fell head over heels for her when he was only 6 and they were in Sunday school together. But Bess was as close to upper class as you could find in Independence, and Harry was at the other end of the social spectrum. His chances with Bess became even slimmer when he left town to work on his family's farm after high school. Then in 1910, he returned to Independence to visit his aunt and was given a golden opportunity by a cake pan. His aunt had borrowed it from Mrs. Wallace, and when Harry heard that she was about to go over and return it, he snatched it and ran over to the Wallace residence himself. Beth invited him in and saw something in the grown-up dirt farm that she hadn't before. She agreed to see him again. Harry was elated. Their courtship was a long one. Madge wasn't crazy about her daughter's attachment to a guy with soil under his fingernails and kept hoping that their relationship was merely a phase. Besides, America's entry to World War I meant postponing their wedding further while Harry went off to fight as an artillery officer. When he returned in 1919, Truman opened up a men's clothing store with a war buddy and finally married the love of his life. Oh, this story is so romantic. It's killing me because I'm a romantic at heart. An upperclassman, a rich woman, who just stuck up her nose at him and go, "You're no good for me. I'll never marry you or date you. You fool, you farmer fool." But she's like, man, she's like, you're something, you know. You're something. Okay, fine, I'll date you. Honey, I have to enlist because we're going into war, and they need me to enlist. Can we postpone our wedding until I get back? If you get back, I will. I promise. I will live through this. Okay, I'll wait for you. Years later. Honey, I'm home. Let's get married now, right away. Okay. Oh. Yeah, yay. The newlyweds couldn't afford a place of their own, so they moved in with Madge, whose reservations about her son-in-law's project soon seemed justified. The haberdashery went belly up in 1922. Harry refused to file for bankruptcy, spending years paying off his creditors, and, with the post-war recession raging, decided to give politics a try. He made contact with the local Democratic machine through fellow veterans who convinced him to run for a minor administrative judgeship. The shady Poles who pursued Harry gave Bess to Willis, but her husband had made up his mind and he won the election. The new job wasn't much, but it paid some bills, which continued to mount after the birth of daughter Mary Margaret in 1924. The Trumans continued to live at the Wallace homestead, where Bess looked after her mother, raised her daughter, acted as matriarch to her brothers, and watched her husband's political career blossom. By 1934, he became big enough in Missouri to make a run for the Senate. Bess was mortified by the prospect of leaving the only community she ever loved, but she supported Harry anyway. And soon they were off to Washington. Something about her father's suicide always left a bad taste in Bess's mouth, a feeling that her parents had not been present fully enough in each other's lives. She resolved that her own marriage would be different. And though hesitant about the idea of leaving independence for the national capital, Bess was determined to be as involved as possible in Harry's career, to understand and support the cares that confronted him. She read the congregational record cover to cover, followed debates in the Senate, and ran Harry's office when he wasn't there. Truman eventually made quite a name for himself in the Senate, especially for his investigation into defense contracts during World War II, an ambitious task that saved the government scads of dollars. His reward came right after the top. President Franklin Roosevelt wanted Harry as his running mate in 1944. Bess hated the idea for several reasons. First, there was the matter of her father's suicide, whose exposure would go hard on her, and even harder on Madge. Second, there was Margaret to think of, a girl who deserved better than to read about her own evolution to womanhood in the newspapers. And third, there was FDR. Anyone could see that he had one foot and perhaps an arm in the grave already, and was unlikely in the extreme to last another 4 years in office. Was Harry at the age of 60 up to being leader of the free world in wartime? Even Harry himself had doubts about the offer, but his sense of duty to the Democrats and the country eventually swayed his opinion. Bess, who could have put her foot down and nipped the whole thing in the bud, Harry had been calling her the boss for years, swallowed her dread and bowed to fate. It wasn't easy. After watching Harry secure the vice presidential spot at the convention before cheering crowds, she asked him in a fit pick, Are we going to have to go through this for the rest of our lives? It wasn't long before Bess's worst fear came to pass. FDR died in April 1945, and Mrs. Truman could have kicked herself for letting her husband accept the vice presidential post. The situation was dire. Though Germany and Japan faced imminent defeat, the war was not over yet. And coming on the heels of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, two of the most sensational and hyperactive leaders in American history were two small-town Missourians without so much as a single college credit between them. Even those who hated the Roosevelts were holding their breath, wondering what in God's name a fellow haberdasher and his brisk wives could possibly bring to the highest office in the world. The question weighed heavily on the Trumans themselves. Harry felt overwhelmed by his new gig, and he needed his wife more than ever. Ironically, he was in no position to act upon that need, finding himself, for the first time in his political career, unable to inform Bess about all that he needed to deal with. Military secrets are just that, and nobody, not even a first lady, was privy to them. As Harry shared less and less with Bess, she became more and more frustrated, and their marriage entered a crisis. One that didn't end when the war did. The president finally came around after a few tense months, and any potential arguments, and the first couple resumed their working relationship. Kind of like me and Robbie. We have times where we're bickering because we can't communicate properly sometimes, and then we finally come around and we finally communicate better and get everything resolved. And it was a close one, to be sure. They had always been loving and respectful partners, two people with enormous esteem for each other who knew the other's strengths and weaknesses. Those qualities were now harnessed to forge leadership in a country that had assumed a unique place in the world. Every evening, Bess disappeared with her husband into his study, where she edited his speeches, gave her opinion on policy decisions, and offered an objectivity to criticism that Harry was notoriously incapable of realizing himself. No one was as influential to the president as the First Lady was, and Harry acted upon every one of her suggestions. She directly affected his cabinet appointments, styled his responses to queries and attacks, calmed his legendary fits of temper, and helped him to see to complete such vital legislative agendas as the Marshall Plan to relieve war-torn European population. But nobody knew that. Family was still the most important thing to Mrs. Truman, and she guarded its privacy with ceaseless, stoic silence, preferring a role in the background that adopted no causes, made no stir. Her husband was the elected one, not she, a fact that the frustrated press courts learned early on. Of all Bess's challenges, the First Lady none was as daunting as the fact that she wasn't Eleanor Roosevelt. She was no co-president, and anyone who had a problem with that could stuff it. Love her. Her influence on Harry was as secret as it was profound, but the First Lady's two favorite words became no comment. That would be my words, too. If my husband ever became president, if my boyfriend ever became president, I would be saying, no comment, no comment, no comment, bye. Throwing indignantly at reporters who wanted to dig deeper than she was willing to go. She took pride in overseeing two responsibilities that Eleanor had neglected: keeping the White House clean, the mansion was a disaster when the Trumans moved it, and restoring the sort of elegant entertaining that had been seen since before the Great Depression. The fact that nobody thought Harry had a chance of re-election in 1948 came mostly as good news to Bess. He couldn't wait to retire back in independence, but when he secured a surprise victory, it allowed her to undertake one of her most important projects. The White House's problem went far beyond peeling paint and rats. It was literally falling apart, proof of which came when daughter Margaret's piano nearly fell through the floor. What the? That way up to this day, the same executive mansion with Abigail Adams hung her laundry is due mostly to Bess Truman, who insisted that the government pay for a very expensive renovation rather than erasing the old structure and erecting a new one. The First Lady broke out of her preferred anonymity to lobby congressmen like crazy, eventually convincing them to preserve the White House as is with steel reinforcements to prevent its collapse. Harris was elected to run for a third term, came great news to Bess. They went back to the old Wallace homestead in Independence, where the former president wrote his memoirs and remained a feisty source of opinion, political or otherwise, until his death in 1972. His wife kept up the tradition, offering spirited support to Democratic candidates, but keeping her lips as tight as ever during interviews. Besides marking the end of an extraordinary life, her death in 1982 is significant for two reasons. She remains the longest-lived First Lady of them all at 97, and she's the first to have her role inscribed on her gravestone. First Lady, 1945 to 1953. Holy shit. That was a lot. And as you can tell, I got more and more animated this time. Because she reminds me kind of like me, I think. I mean, my father didn't kill himself. He died of a heart attack because he worked so hard. He basically worked himself to death at the age of around his 60s. I don't exactly remember how old he was, but yeah, he was in his 60s when he died. I wasn't expecting that to happen so soon. You know, my dad was something. He wasn't a drinker or anything like Bess's father. But he was a real in-and-out true Mexican. Let me tell you that. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I mean, like, that book is getting more and more good, more and more interesting as we get closer to more of the modern age, you know? Because in the beginning, the First Ladies were just trying to figure out what to do as First Ladies. We didn't know what to do at first as First Ladies, but yeah. Anyways, please rate, subscribe, and comment down below. And once I get to 50 subscribers on YouTube and 50 followers on TikTok, I'll do something special, okay? I'm not gonna tell you because it's gonna be a surprise. Okay, and please, and if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell notification so they can know when I upload. Cause right now I'm kind of like sort of busy, so I might not upload all the time. But yeah, and please pay for something on either my eBay and or Mercari. Okay, bye. And please like and follow my videos on TikTok. Okay, bye.